Okay, well, I'm going to start. Good morning, everyone. I'm Danny Glazer and one of the directors of the Green Business Partnership. Scott Fernquist, who was one of my co-directors, is on the call, as is Ethan Kravitz, who is our director of membership. And certainly hope that everybody's safe and well, and really appreciate that Bud is going to allay some fears today about returning to work. So we want to welcome you. This is a webinar series. The Green Business Partnership has done many webinars over the years, but this one is really going to be quite official. And I look at it as a brand new kickoff to our webinar series. So thank you for joining us. And Atlantic Westchester achieved Green Business certification through the Green Business Partnership in December of 2015. And before that, they were a longtime member of our program. So, and what we love about what Atlantic Westchester does is not only did they become a sustainable organization within their company, looking at everything from their energy, their waste, water, transportation, the fleet that you see behind all of them. Everything has been looked at through the greenest, most efficient lens. But Bud and his team are out there in the world. They're servicing clients. They're engaging the community like they are doing this today, and are sustainable out in the world. So it's just so important to us, and we're just so proud of our relationship with Atlantic Westchester and the whole team. And Bud and his team have also been, can everybody mute themselves except for the speakers? That'd be awesome. Just want to mention that Bud has been a sponsor of the program for many years. So we're just a tremendous gratitude for that. A couple of things. I posted a flyer about the Green Business Partnership in the chat box. We welcome and love to have conversations with anybody who wants to learn about our program. And just a little housekeeping. Everybody should keep themselves on mute, except for whoever is speaking. And please post your questions into the chat box, and Ethan will monitor the box at the end of this Bud's presentation. We will get to everybody's questions. So I think that wraps up my part, and Bud, it's my pleasure to welcome you to speak.
Well, thank you, Danny. I really appreciate it. It's great to be a member of the Green Business Partnership. We joined during officially phase 2, so we missed the first year, but we got on in the second year, and we've really enjoyed everything that organization has helped us realize and adapt to as far as changing our organization for a more sustainable future. I also want to thank everybody that is on this webinar for participating. There's lots of familiar names and faces, so hello, friends and family. For those that don't know us, it's very nice to meet you. I'm fairly present on LinkedIn, so if anybody would like to link in with me, I'm an open networker. Feel free to look up Bud Hammer and send me a connection invitation, and I will certainly comply. With that being said, there's going to be a short PowerPoint, and in the spirit of the Green Business Partnership, I would like to try to make this an efficient presentation to cover essentially 3 steps that we are recommending to reoccupy buildings. Before I get started on the presentation, there's been buzzwords that have been introduced to us during this pandemic and the New York pause, if you will, that's been instilled by the governor. Healthy, safety, and security. Those are 3 main words that we've heard probably on a daily basis. Everybody's been sending out emails or placing phone calls, and the first words that we typically say are, we're hoping you're doing well, or staying healthy, you and your families. So certainly this has brought us all together because we're all potentially victims to this silent virus that's lurking amongst us, and our region of the country was early on and pretty hard hit. So we've been very sensitive to the whole evolution of this horrible situation. So the purpose of this is to have building owners, managers, occupants, landlords, and whomever else is associated with occupying a commercial, industrial, or institutional facility to essentially gain a level of confidence that they can walk inside and feel that they've done what they can to try to safeguard the other occupants in the building. One of the challenges of the COVID-19 virus has been, since it's so new, we don't know all the answers. We don't know all of the effective solutions of how to get rid of it. We don't have a vaccine, so there's been talk of a second wave. However, a lot of us have adapted through, whether it's self-quarantining, social distancing, being an essential worker and exposed to what's going on out there, watching the daily news conferences on the television. We've changed our behavior. We all are pretty much wearing masks. We have hand sanitizer glory surrounding us in all places. As we went through kind of the shortage on that stuff, it's rebounded. And there's been a lot of companies that have sort of repurposed their manufacturing strategy to help with a vibrant supply of personal protective equipment. PPE has always been around in our industry, and ironically, now everybody knows what that stands for. So that's a good thing, and there's been a lot of lessons learned throughout this whole thing. HVAC is a thing that I've been involved with for a good part of my life, 31 years professionally, and finally, it's gaining some focus and attention that it's never really enjoyed before. HVAC equipment is typically on a roof of a building. It lives in a ceiling or it's in a basement. And unless there's something wrong with it, whether there's a noise, a smell, or a period of discomfort, people don't really pay attention to it until it does become an issue. So finally, my industry is, if you'll excuse the expression, getting some well-deserved sex appeal. So with that being said, I will pop my presentation on the screen. Just bear with me for a moment. And there we go. So Danny, if you can confirm, we have a full screen.
There you go.
Okay. So this is the first slide, introduction, and basically there are 3 steps that we are going to cover. One is the immediate implementation. The second is spring maintenance, which is very timely right now. And the third is a recommendation that we're going to make to some buildings to consider an upgrade. So I'll jump right into this. The first step is focused on buildings that are either empty, have been shut for a while, or have had a skeleton crew where perhaps the entire HVAC system has not been operational. So like any kind of a machine or a vehicle that sits for a little while, it's always a good idea to kind of run the systems and get the fluids running and just get things moving. So what I'd recommend for those of you that are related to a building that's been empty for a little while, make sure that you turn things on. You can reprogram your system so that you don't have to necessarily have a low temperature for air conditioning or maintain a warmer temperature for heat such that you would be occupied. And I think at this point, it's pretty safe to say that we're out of the heating system. So as it's gotten warmer and a little humid out, a thing to be very concerned about is having air conditioning running. Mold, mildew, stagnant odors, any kind of bacteria that might be growing in a building will get worse over time if air conditioning is not running and doing its job for dehumidifying space. If you can, outside air being introduced or increased is important. If you have a building with windows that open on the initial reoccupancy of essentially unlocking the front door, open a bunch of windows and just have the outside air kind of create some cross ventilation while you're running your HVAC system to dilute anything that's kind of been sitting in that building for a while if the systems have been off. I would recommend until you start to increase occupancy, you just keep your ventilation system running so that the building can have air changed in it over time. So as I said before, you just kind of consider diluting what's ever out there. It's been talked about with this virus as we learn and it evolves, that we're not sure if it's airborne. Certainly on surfaces, it's been shown to be. Human-to-human contact seems to be the highest level of contagion. However, doorknobs, constantly touched surfaces by multiple people need to be paid attention to as far as cleanliness. And it goes back to essential common behavior so that you're practicing good hygiene, washing your hands, just not touching your face if you're touching surfaces. So if you can try to adapt your behavior to that, you certainly limit the risk of picking up this virus. Validating controls on the bottom of this slide just basically means check your thermostat settings and make sure that you're either not set for 85 if you're in cooling or 55 if you're in heat, so that your building can have a chance to do some treatment of the air and the humidity that's in there. At the end here, I'll open this up for questions in case any of this information generates some thought. Then the next thing, for those of you that are either in the process of reopening your building or you're coming back with a more dense population, because the weather has changed from heating season to cooling season, it's important to do a maintenance. And when we talk about maintenance, it's not just changing a filter, it's doing a quality maintenance, particularly since we're trying to instill a level of safety and security to the occupants going into that building. Quality maintenance, we think, is important. And that includes not only changing your air filtration, even if it looks clean, it's been sitting in there for a little while, but perhaps upgrade it. Upgrade the filtration level, and there's a slide coming up that'll show you the differences in the particle sizes that different kinds of filters will pick up. Your coils in your airstream should be cleaned. The drain pan should be cleaned, which is typical spring maintenance. And then going through everything and doing a thorough startup to make sure that the system will be reliable and is operating at a decent level of efficiency is just going to help the building work better, and it's going to be one less thing that you guys will have to worry about. One thing I would recommend, if you're not intimately familiar with your HVAC systems and how they work, speak to your service provider or your in-house staff who's ever doing the work and ask them some questions. Perhaps they can show you some of the inner workings of the system and what's being done to essentially clean it and try to filter the air so that you can maintain maximum performance and efficiency. Excuse me. The third part of our step here is once the initial opening of the building and maintenance has been performed and your system is running, now consider, there's the filter chart. I'll just go through this quickly. The lower MERV. MERV stands for Minimum Efficient Reporting Value. Basically, it's a rating of what size dust and dirt particles can pass through a filter. The lower number, which is in the red, is a more porous filtration material. The higher number, which morphs into green, is the higher level. One thing I want to just mention about filtration, most commercial buildings are using MERV 8 filters, which is a standard of our industry. It's now being recommended to upgrade to a MERV 13 rating, again, based on the particle size. I want to caution everybody against immediately going to a MERV 13 filter because not every HVAC system is designed to run with a MERV 13 filter rating. Fans are designed for a certain pressure drop, and without getting super technical, I just caution against that. If you do put in MERV 13 rated filters, check them frequently in case they're picking up a lot of dirt, because the more dirt that they'll pick up, the less airflow will easily pass through them, and you could be causing some issues. So just be careful about that. We will make this PowerPoint available to everybody on this webinar if you would like it, so you can spend some more time looking at some of this information. So the third step is taking your system and looking at the quality of it, the merits of it, the design of it, and considering upgrading the air cleaning capabilities. Our chief engineer is Brian Hoffman, and since we didn't have a lot of experience in this step in the buildings in which we work in, because there was never a big need for this, we've investigated essentially two kinds of different technology for cleaning air. One is ultraviolet lights, and the other is something called needlepoint bipolar ionization, which is somewhat of a fun mouthful to say. UV lights has been fairly popular and in the news, and we weren't sure if that was the technology that we were going to follow. And again, we didn't know a lot about it, so Brian did a whole bunch of research and has come back to our team with the suggestion that we go in the needlepoint bipolar ionization methodology. Basically, it's a device that consumes very low power, so it's easy to connect to an existing wiring system that's attached to an HVAC piece of equipment. There's a whole bunch of different sizes and applications of the technology, so basically it's the magic one-size-fits-all as far as implementing the technology. And then over time, it does a lot of things that will help clean stuff that's in the air that you may or may not realize. This next slide here shows a specific company called Global Plasma Solutions, who we have a partnership with. And they have been a leader in this technology in our industry. And over the last few weeks, Brian has done a lot of research and vetting and speaking to buildings that have actually installed this stuff. And the benefits and the positive results of that research are quite large. So if you look on the left side of this, needlepoint bipolar ionization essentially does a great job of putting positive and negative charges into an airstream when it's running. And what it does is as it gets distributed through a duct system out into a space, it continues to work for about 60 seconds after it has left the fan. And by being out in the space with the negative and the positive ions, it essentially works to kind of be drawn together. And as the positive and the negative charges are drawn together, they trap particles and dust and whatever may be in the airstream. And as the dust and particles become combined, they become bigger. So my point about upgrading from filtration of, let's say, MERV 8 to a MERV 13, with having a bipolar ionization system in and taking those dust molecules and essentially clumping them together, we're making that filter more effective on the job that it's trying to do. So the needlepoint ionization essentially helps the filter capture bigger particles. It also does a pretty good job on getting rid of odors, and as a tremendous benefit, particularly in this part of the country, since the last few summers have had some tropical weather that we're not really accustomed to, and a lot of our HVAC systems are not necessarily designed for, we've had a tremendous growth in mold problems. So as a side effect, bipolar ionization does a pretty good job of killing mold bacteria. The one thing I want to guard against for anybody in the scientific or pharmaceutical industry, please be very careful if you're considering this technology, because it has been proven to kill things that are growing in petri dishes as an experiment. So it may cause a problem. So I just wanted to mention that. However, in your standard occupied building of people and regular kind of functions, it has had no ill effect on the people or the occupants in those buildings, including animals. So this is just comparing UV light and needlepoint bipolar ionization side by side. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this slide because, as I mentioned, out of respect for your time, I'm trying to keep this efficient, and we will certainly make this available to everybody that's participated. So you can certainly have this and spend as much time as you'd like. And I'd also recommend that you go to the GPS website because they have a lot of information. This here is opening up the GPS comparison to other technology that's in our industry and out there. However, UV light has really been the most common strategy compared to the needlepoint bipolarization based on the experience and the research that we did. So with that being said, we think that these 3 steps are just good common practice and will bring certain levels of security and safetyness and some healthiness to your building so that you can let your occupants know that you've done what you can to make them feel safe. And on top of good hygiene and good common sense, hopefully as we reoccupy and try to get back to what I would call normal, we won't have a second wave. And hopefully at some point we'll have a vaccine, and this whole thing will just help enhance the quality of air in buildings. One thing I do want to mention, since COVID has been relatively new, as I said before, there's been limited research done, excuse me, but we just got a report from a laboratory in California that looked at bipolar ionization and the COVID virus bacteria on a surface, and they did some time testing under a controlled environment, and they did find that the ionization was effective on killing the virus in a reasonably short period of time. That paper's coming out hopefully in the next day or two, and if we can, we may incorporate that as an attachment into sending out this presentation. And you all are certainly welcome to go to the GPS website and ask as many questions of them to convince yourself that this is in fact real. So with that being said, that's the summary of excuse me, what I just covered. And it's 3 what we think are fairly standard and easy steps. The implementation of the ionization solution is straightforward. There's not a lot of equipment to install. The wiring is easy. The labor is low. So with that being said, I will turn this back to the gallery view. And if anybody has any questions, please.
Yes, so we're getting a couple questions through the chat. The first from Marilyn Russell. Is it your opinion that UV lighting doesn't work or just doesn't work as well?
I'll go with answer B. We did some research, and if Brian is available to interject when needed, I'll give you the level of understanding that I have. UV lighting is very effective as long as it's shining on the light that's passing the stream.
The air.
Excuse me?
The air that's passing through. The light
Right.
the air. The trouble is it passes through so fast that the contact time isn't enough to really be effective.
However, it is effective if it's shining on a cooling coil and a drain pan and whatever air is passing in its path. The beauty about the ionization is after it passes through the module that's creating that positive and negative charge on the airstream, it stays in the air. And the negative and positive charges can be measured through an ion meter, which is an electrical device, out in the space. And it continues to work for approximately 60 seconds after the air has passed through. It's almost like sending your air through a car wash.
Okay, that's actually a pretty good segue into our next question about the ionization. What's the costs associated with that, and is it available for residential use?
Okay, so as I mentioned, we felt that this manufacturer was a great resource because it comes in a lot of different shapes and sizes. So the answer is yes. It's well suited for a residential application all the way up to a large industrial application. They make lots of different types of ionization devices in small ductless equipment or through the wall, like hotel style incremental units, or even in a window air conditioner. They make basically a ribbon strip that you can basically tape inside of the unit as long as the air is passing underneath it, such that it can treat what's coming out of that small unitary device. And then larger equipment they make a module device that, depending upon the size of the coil in that unit, you basically build the thing to match the width of the coil so that you cover the airstream. So lots of flexibility.
I also want to just clarify one thing, but it's needle point bipolar ionization. It's very critical. It doesn't say needle point. It's not what we're talking about. Because there is something called bipolar ionization. It's a whole separate thing. That's not what we're talking about.
Thank you, Brian.
Yep.
Okay, so thank you. The next question comes from Danielle. Bud, what is the best cleaning method that your company uses for interior and exterior equipment?
Right now, old-fashioned spray sanitizer and wipes, which is a newly applied behavior. We never did that before. Typically, we would just wipe down equipment, from dust and grease and dirt when we did a maintenance. The coils themselves, there's been some newer things introduced to the market that have enzymes in them that break down certain bacteria that builds up. It's called biofilm. Depending upon the application, we try to find a good product and a solution that kind of matches an effective way to clean. One thing I will mention, excuse me, is that if you're in a building that you are cleaning and sterilizing, the sterilization is only good for a certain period of time until you have more occupants coming from outside, essentially spreading whatever they're bringing into the building. So we thought that the needlepoint bipolar ionization was a very nice complement to a sterilization of a building, because the needlepoint process does continuous cleaning. So does sterilization. However, the sterilization has a shelf life to it.
Okay, we got a couple more questions. So from Rick, Bud, any concerns about Legionnaires disease from HVAC systems that have been offline for the past couple months?
Yes. Well, Legionnaires, kind of an unrelated topic. However, the good news is that's on the list of what needlepoint bipolarization also kills. So bipolarization, it's not bipolar ionization. I apologize. Legionnaires is an organism, a virus that was discovered about 40 years ago at a convention. And in the state of New York, our industry came out with regulations and guidelines that require us to do certain things to systems that can, in fact, spread Legionnaire's disease. So there's a whole means and methods for attacking cooling towers and domestic water supplies through chemical water treatment. But if you have a building that has needlepoint bipolar ionization in it, their claim is that it will kill the Legionnaire bacteria.
Okay.
Actually, Legionella. Technically, it's called Legionella.
Here's a quick one. Does your company do duct cleaning?
No, we do not. We recommend duct cleaning to those that are interested in it. I will just briefly talk on my conservative approach to duct cleaning. Dust accumulates over time as it passes through filters and coils and gets into ductwork. Sometimes you'll see on air grills, there might be some what looks like dark or black dust. Unless there's mold growing, you can wipe that with basically a fantastic spray and some paper towels. We've never been strong proponents of duct cleaning unless there is some sort of a bacteria or something that's growing in the ductwork itself, or it's causing a problem where it's perhaps plugging up some reheat coils or causing an operational issue.
Okay. So then from Christy, in reference to increasing outside air, is there a recommendation or standard on the percentage?
Well, there's a building code guidance for buildings that are occupied publicly that there's a certain level of what we call cubic feet per minute of outside air provided as ventilation air per number of occupants. That number is 15 in the state of New York. The city of New York has a little bit of a different requirement. correct me if I'm wrong, Brian, on those numbers. I believe that 15 is the magic number. That's a minimum that's required just to meet building code in this day and age. If you had the capabilities to increase the outside air, I don't suggest that you do it on a long-term strategy, because we don't want to be inefficient and overtax air conditioning systems that were not designed to take that amount of outside air in when it gets hot and humid out. And if you were to implement needlepoint bipolar ionization, that actually has an effect on the air purification, so that you can reduce the amount of airflow coming from outside that mixes with the recirculated air. So in effect, this can help with an efficient strategy. To answer the true question, is there a recommended percentage or dilution factor? No.
Okay. Next question. Is there a handheld sensor product on the market that will allow me to measure the indoor air quality, such as bacteria, mold, CO2, carbon, virus, or any other pathogens that are commonly found in duct systems?
I'm going to let Brian answer that, because he's done a bunch of research on that.
Yes, there are what we call VOC meters that can check the air quality. As far as pathogens, I don't know of a test kit that would be able to verify whether or not there's viruses or bacteria. As a matter of fact, we have just purchased a couple of VOC meters, so that if you're interested in doing the GPS solution, we would do before and after testing of the air quality to see, to make sure the system's working. And there you go.
Okay, so I'm going to combine two of the questions because they seem to be pretty linked. How long does the ionization last in a unit? And then what's the dwelling time needed for the bipolar ionization? Is there a dwelling time?
Okay. The ionization is, as long as the unit's running, it's putting out positive and negative ions in the airstream. They last, I think, 60 seconds after they come off the probes, but they get into the air, there's millions of them. They effectively do their magic, attaching the particles, attacking pathogens by removing hydrogen, reducing odors by converting VOCs into common compounds like oxygen, nitrogen. And as far as ozone generation, okay, bipolar ionization does give off ozone. Needlepoint bipolar ionization does not give off ozone. I can get into the technical specs if you want, but it has to do with the electron voltage potential of the compounds, and the needlepoint does not generate ozone.
So long story short, it doesn't smell.
Right.
The other thing, and I don't know if this was part of that question, we've been told that the average system life of these needlepoint bipolar ionization is about 8 to 10 years in a system. Right. And the larger commercial versions are all self-cleaning. So there's essentially no maintenance once it's installed and running.
Okay, and last question that I'm seeing on the chat is what you're suggesting, especially with the ionization, but also, everything else that you're talking about. Would you suggest that become common practice moving forward?
Yeah, this technology has been around for quite some time. In light of this group that we're all a part of, the Green Business Partnership, we look for energy consumption reduction strategy. And by incorporating this technology, you can have cleaner air inside of a building without using outside air to dilute what's being recirculated. So the mere fact that you can put some instrumentation in to measure the quality of the air, you can reduce the amount of outside air coming in. And as everybody can imagine, on super hot or super cold days, HVAC system is working to cool or heat that air in addition to what's being recirculated, and then dealing with what we call heat load or heat loss. So in effect, this can make a system become more efficient. I'm going to approach the utilities, primarily Con Edison and Willdan Energy, who are implementing energy efficiency strategies, to see if there's a way that we can try to get some sort of an incentive from the utility company to help pay for this technology. Haven't done that yet.
Okay.
Excuse me.
I think we hit everything in the chat. So thank you for answering all the questions.
Yeah, this was
Thank everybody for asking them.
yeah, great questions, very engaged group, and such an important topic. So we really, really appreciate Atlantic Westchester, Bud Hammer, for giving this very informative, important presentation. We will post the recording of this Zoom call as well as Bud's PowerPoint on our website at greenbusinesspartnership.org on our resources page. And we will shoot everybody an email just to let you know that it is posted. And please feel free to share it with anyone else who might be interested in it, as well as Bud's contact information. I think that they have a lot to offer. And just again, just very, very much appreciate all of you being here.
Thank you.
And thank you.
That was great.
Thank you very much, everybody. And
Thank you, Bud.
stay safe out there.
Oh,
You
you'll
too.
notice Stan.
Oh, and that's my office manager. Everybody needs one. Bye, everybody.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Take care.